Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Swarns with the New York Times, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to a special afternoon edition of Race Night, our weekly conversation about race. Well, it is August, and it is sweltering here in New York City, and so it's really the perfect time to be talking about swimming pools and the racial and ethnic conflicts that have flared up around them this summer, particularly about what happened when a group of Muslim children went to a pool in Delaware. And we've got some great guests to discuss this today. We've got Juvaria Khan, a staff attorney at Muslim Advocates, a legal advocacy and educational organization. Juvaria, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Jeff Wiltsey is a history professor at the University of Montana and the author of Contested Waters, A Social History of Swimming Pools in America. I'm guessing he gets a lot of calls from journalists around this time of year. Welcome, Jeff.
Every summer. It's my pleasure to be here.
And we're also joined by Mia Miller, whose children were at that pool in Wilmington and will share her personal account. Mia, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to remind our viewers that really this is a conversation that involves you. And so please jump in, share your questions, your comments, your experiences, and we will bring them into the conversation. But first, let me start with you, Juvaria. Tell me what happened when a group of Muslim children went to the Foster Brown pool in Wilmington, Delaware this summer.
Absolutely. So Dar al-Amana is an organization that was founded over a decade ago, and it primarily serves the local Muslim community, and particularly the African-American Muslim community that has lived in this neighborhood for decades now. They have a summer program that they do every year, and one of the things the kids love to do is to go to the pool, as do all kids. And so this year, they got ready and went to the pool, and instead of having the normal nice experience that they usually have, they were told that they would have to leave because the clothing that they were wearing didn't comply with a policy that they had never even heard of before, a policy that's unwritten, that has never been enforced, and that wasn't enforced against other children who are there who are also in similar clothing. So a lot of the kids from Dar al-Amana were wearing, for example, a t-shirt or leggings as part of their religious beliefs to dress modestly. But it's worth noting that many of the children at the pool, even if they're non-Muslim, wear similar clothing because that's the type of clothing that they can afford. And none of them were getting targeted, but it was the children of Dar al-Amana over and over, as Mia can personally attest to. Her children are as young as 5 and 6 years old, little girls who were being picked on until they started crying. And, it's worth noting, this isn't a one-off incident. It's happened again and again and again and again. And despite repeated complaints by the parents and the staff of Dar al-Amana, nothing substantive has really been done to address it.
Mia, so you were there at least on one occasion toward the end of one of these incidents. And again, I just want to remind our viewers that we're talking about a situation where a group of Muslim children went to a pool, and this is what happened. Tell us, Mia, what you saw and what you learned about your children's experiences there.
Pretty much, my children, as she said, attends Dar al-Amana Academy. They've been going there for 2 years now. I grew up in Wilmington myself, and we always swam in what we had. Some of us couldn't afford, the bathing suits and everything. So once I got wind of, the so-called proper attire thing, the cotton issue, I changed my daughter's attire into cut-off spandex pants, shorts, and like a dry fit material shirt and like a nylon material head wrap. And still, they were targeted. That wasn't enough. They were still picked on. The next day they went back. It was like, oh, they still can't swim. This is still not proper attire. My kids are special needs. So literally my kids sat on the side of the pool every single time and cried like babies, and I just felt heartbroken because no child should ever have to experience this level of disrespect, and it's because of their religion. It's just horrible. And I mean, I was in tears myself, just because, like I said, no child should have to experience this. And it happened repeatedly, like every time they went. And even though I changed the attire numerous times, like 2 or 3 times, this pool staff still targeted my children. And, they came home, they're like, "Mommy, why can't we swim?" And I'm like, sometimes people do things that aren't right. That doesn't mean that you do the wrong thing. You just explain to them, this is my religion, this is who I am. And, this continue to be kind to them. This explain to them, don't change who you are. You're beautiful the way you are. So it's not you. It's just that some people just don't understand.
Right. And I want to let our viewers know that we did invite the mayor of Wilmington, Delaware, and one of his staff members to join the conversation to talk about it from their perspective, and they declined to do so. But they did say that an article that we ran in the New York Times did express their opinions on the subject, at least as it stands right now. And what they said in that was that the mayor had apologized to the children, and that they also confirmed that the rules and regulations of the pools do not prohibit cotton clothing. In fact, that the only clothing limitation is that they prohibit cut-off jeans. And one of our viewers here, Carl Jacob, says, as a Delawarean, I can say that this does not reflect the attitude of most of us here. I'm sorry for these children's experiences. And remember, we do want to hear from you. But let's go to you, Jeff. A lot of us think about summer and pools and beaches as, kind of the happiest, most free-spirited times that we might have. But there's a long history of conflict and contention, racial conflict and contention about swimming pools, right?
Absolutely. Swimming pools have long been sites of social disputes and also cultural disputes. And I think there's both social and cultural elements to what happened at the Foster Brown pool. And there's a variety of reasons why, but I'll just focus on 2 really quickly. One, and I think pretty much most people recognize this, that swimming pools are intimate spaces. And there's an intimacy involved in their use. There's a visual intimacy of exposing more of your body in the public than you would in other spaces. You also see other people, mostly unclothed. There's also a physical intimacy involved in pool use, in which you're sharing an enclosed body of water. And this raises anxieties about the cleanliness of other people or the clothes that they're wearing, whether their clothes are clean. Because there's this sense that being in an enclosed body of water with others is tantamount to physical contact. And pools are also, I would describe them as being socially intimate, that people typically go to pools for an hour, 2 hours, or even more. They can oftentimes be very crowded. You won't know most of the people at the pool, but there's interactions that have to occur. There's navigating around people that has to occur. There's also conversations that occur. And so in all these ways, pool use involves a certain level of intimacy, and historically, what that's necessitated for people to feel comfortable swimming with other people is a certain level of social trust. Trusting that other people at the pool sort of aren't going to do them harm, whether it be physical harm in the sense of unwanted touching, or pose them a danger to their health. And historically, Americans have not had a great deal of social trust across racial lines.
Right.
I'll leave it to others who have greater expertise sort of in the current sort of religious relations in America, to assess to what extent there's sort of social trust across religious lines in American society today. But then one other quick thing that also I think makes pools contested spaces is they tend to be neighborhood spaces, that people perceive of swimming pools as neighborhood institutions, which causes some pool users, regular pool users, to sort of assume almost a proprietary control over them, as though that they can impose certain social and cultural standards and then enforce those cultural standards upon other people. And that is part of also what leads to sort of disputes, confrontations, and conflicts at pools. And I think there's sort of elements of all of this involved in the story or in the incident at the Wilmington pool.
Right. And we've got one of our viewers, Scooter Farnsworth, raises a question, is this a problem in a lot of pools? And Jeff, you wrote a piece this summer about a number of incidents involving African Americans at pools this summer at Winston-Salem, Memphis, Tennessee, I think someplace in South Carolina, Somerville.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's been a rash of incidents. I mean, if you look back, there's been several instances over the last several summers, some of which got written up in a New York Times article today, not to sort of plug your paper, but a very good article.
We're always happy about that.
that references them.
Right.
But this summer has been a little crazy, that there's been a rash of incidents in which people have felt emboldened to go and challenge the right of other people to be at a pool, or have felt emboldened to confront people for kind of maybe minor violations of policy in which there's other people violating policy as well. But in the cases that you mentioned, it's sort of African Americans being singled out and targeted as questioning whether or not they belong there and challenging them on putting their feet in the pool if they have socks on, where other people are similarly violating policy but aren't being singled out.
Yeah, one of the things that seems like in this space too is this sense of, proprietariness that you describe over this pool, like this is our space.
Right.
And I'm wondering, Juvaria, you obviously have heard what the city officials in Wilmington has said in terms of what they there was, they relaxed. They said the restrictions. They want to work with the Muslim community. Is that enough? Are you satisfied with where things are right now?
Respectfully, I think the city has done a good job of handling this as a PR issue, but not a discrimination issue, and that's what it is. This policy and their position on it has shifted a number of times. They've known about it. This has been an ongoing issue all through the summer, and it wasn't until it became public through the media that they even put a public statement out there or tried to acknowledge it. The parents have complained repeatedly, but it had no effect. And the policy still exists to the extent it even is there, right? It's not written. It doesn't seem to be enforced against other groups who would be violating it as well, presumably. And the harm continues even after the mayor's statement came out. The children of Dar el-Amana tried to go back to the same pool and had the same problems. They're at the point where the children are scared to go swimming. They ask their parents questions like, why do people hate Muslims? For a group that was really founded by the community to give these kids pride in their culture and who they are and teach them respect for themselves, this whole incident has really negated all of that good work. And, I'll just note that the mayor may have issued a public apology, and we appreciate that, but we have not gotten direct apology to these students or the parents themselves. And I think, we would hope the city would take this more seriously going forward.
And Mia, tell us a little bit about, what this experience was like for your children. Have you gone back to that pool?
No, we have not gone back to the pool. Actually, the children are swimming in a different area of Wilmington now. They have to drive about maybe 5 or 10 minutes, just to enjoy their swim time. It hasn't been any issues at the new pool, but my children, like Juvaria commented, and they're scared to go because they just don't know, all the trauma they experience with, Foster Brown pool and their staff. They ask me every day, Mommy, if we go, are we going to be able to swim? Are they going to tell us to get out of the pool? And might I add, the staff member literally reached around the teacher to tap my 2 daughters on their shoulder to tell them to get out of the pool on one of the occasions. So they're literally scared. As I stated before, my children are special needs. So they already have a sense of being afraid of people. So, this whole thing has just made it very hard for them. but hopefully going forward, they won't have any more issues and the rest of their summer will be great. Hopefully.
Okay, we hope so. We hope so. Wayne Martin, one of our viewers, has a question. He says, in Muslim majority countries, how would non-Muslims be treated if they wanted to swim in a community pool? And I think it seems like he's raising the question of, well, there are rules or there are mores or traditions of swimming in American pools, and perhaps the children should adopt them. It sounds like that's what he's trying to say. Juvaria?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the beauty of America is that you can both enjoy your religious faith and do the things you enjoy, like going to a pool. And what makes this country so unique is we have a robust First Amendment and free exercise clause that affords us that opportunity. And, I'm not a resident of other Muslim majority countries. I don't set their policy, but I do live here, and I do know that Muslims, just like people of any other faith, should have the right to enjoy the pool without being scared that they're going to be kicked out just for the way they dress.
Right. And Jeff, tell us, I mean, historically, there were laws, right, that barred blacks and whites from swimming in the same pools, right?
Well, certainly in the South. Mm-hmm. To make a long story short, so racial segregation at public pools really dates to the 1920s and 1930s. And when that was imposed in the South, it was mandated by law. And in border state cities like Baltimore, St. Louis, mandated by law. But further north, and also in the West, it was more of a de facto form of segregation, racial segregation that developed at pools, in which, and this goes back to the comment I made earlier, in which sort of locals, people within a local community would use violence and intimidation to keep outsiders from using their pool. And mostly this was along racial lines. And so if a group of African Americans sought to use a pool that was located in a thoroughly white neighborhood, say in Chicago, there's clear examples, many examples, not just in Chicago, but other cities, of them being beaten, physically beaten, as a way to intimidate them from trying to use pools that were earmarked for whites. And so in the North, it was more of a de facto form of segregation rather than a de jure mandated by law segregation.
Right. And we do seem like we are hearing these things popping up quite a bit. Do you have a sense? Has obviously the laws are gone. Public pools are public and open to everyone. Do you have a sense of what's happening? Is it just more attention, or are there more incidents, do you think?
Well, my tendency is always to attach it to history. And so let me do that. That swimming pools have largely been socially segregated spaces for the last almost 100 years. And even after public pools were racially desegregated in the 20 years after World War II, that didn't really lead to significant sort of swimming, especially blacks and whites swimming together. Rather, whites vacated generally pools that black Americans got access to, and they retreated to public pools that were in thoroughly white neighborhoods that were difficult for black Americans to assess. But the bigger story is moving out to the suburbs. Millions and millions of white Americans relocated out to the suburbs during the post-war period, during the era of desegregation, and they purposefully chose to fund private club pools rather than public pools. They purposefully chose to fund private club pools rather than public pools, because at the time, state civil rights laws did not apply to private pools. I'm sorry, I'm messing it up. Private pools, so they could legally continue to discriminate against people of color and other undesirables. And you go out even today to suburban private club pools, and it's uncommon to see people of color. And so it's a long way of saying that for even after desegregation, swimming pools in many places remain sort of socially homogeneous environments. And when you're accustomed to swimming among only people who look like you, and then people who don't look like you, or maybe religiously different, or you perceive them as being different, they come to your pool, it makes people uncomfortable. And it causes sort of anxieties and prejudices that might otherwise remain hidden, especially in public, to come to the surface, so to speak.
Right. And for instance, in that, I think it was the Winston-Salem incident, it was a pool that required, some residency, right? And people assumed that a Black woman could not be a resident, and so asked her to provide some identification or of some sort.
She had the key card that she needed to get into the pool, but that wasn't enough, that she also had to demonstrate residency. She had to show an ID card, whereas no one else at the pool, everyone else who was white, no one else at the pool had to show an ID card. And it seems clear that she was singled out. And the assumption was that, well, she didn't belong here. And what would cause someone to think that she didn't belong there? Because she was African American.
Juvaria, your organization is a national organization. Have you encountered other situations like this in other places?
Yeah, I think Jeff has done a great job contextualizing this issue and highlighting that discrimination at places like public pools are not new. They go to that issue of who belongs and who do we think that person should look like, who should be in that space. But what we have seen is an emboldening of certain prejudices and them coming to the light in a way that perhaps people would be more socially shamed into not sharing them before. So you'll see, for example, businesses that will put up signs saying Muslims not allowed. Ooh. Or you'll see a rash of incidents of people of color not being welcomed in certain spaces. I think what you have here is a confluence of so many different factors that are at play for the children of Dar el-Amana in particular. You have class-based issues, you have race-based issues, you have religious-based issues, and all of that combines to really get at that underlying current of who is entitled to be here, who is really American, who really looks the way or dresses the way that we feel comfortable with and think they should belong here.
Right. Well, Tyra Zafar says that she appreciates people having open and diplomatic discussions. We always try to do that on race night. And, I guess we'll have to see how this plays out in Wilmington. City officials there say that they are continuing to investigate the allegations. They say that the person who was in charge of the pool has been put on administrative leave. And, we certainly hope, Mia, that your kids feel comfortable swimming in the pool wherever they end up. And we want to thank our viewers and everyone who has joined us, and our guests, of course, this afternoon. And we want to remind everyone who's watching that, this is a conversation that we have here every week, Wednesday nights normally. And that this discussion starts with you. We hope that you'll subscribe to our race-related newsletter. It has great content, great articles, photos, visuals, but most of all, it starts with you, with your ideas, your questions, your comments. So I'd like to thank you all, Jeff, Juvaria, Mia, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And, I hope that everyone will have a wonderful summer and that we'll see you next week.
Yes.